Okay, good evening, everyone. It's 6:03 and I'm going to call this meeting to order. Welcome to the December 14th special meeting of the Transportation Advisory Board. My name is Cynthia Kress. I currently serve as the chair. For those who are keeping track, this meeting was originally scheduled for November and had to be rescheduled. There was originally going to be no tab meeting in December, so this meeting catches us up after that cancellation. I also want to welcome our newest member, Avi, did I say that right?
Yeah.
Yes, who is our youth member, and we're really excited to fill that position. So with five of us, we have a quorum. We might have one or two joining us, but I definitely want to get underway. The first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes, and I'm seeking approval of the October 25 minutes by unanimous consent as presented. I'm sorry, with one minor change. I'm listed twice as both here and excused.
Oh,
And I was not here. And thank you, Julian, for taking that. And now we have Dave, so we have six. I'm seeking approval of the October 25th minutes by unanimous consent with that minor change to take Cynthia's name off the here list. And not hearing any objections, so the minutes are approved with that minor change. Great. That brings us to public comment. And before we invite the person who signed up, I don't have a sheet, so I can't introduce you, but I will, I can't call your name, but I will also just mention that we did get several emails on this topic, and I think that's worth noting. One of those emailers is online, and I just want to make sure that people are seeing those, and we should probably develop a practice on how to incorporate those comments we get during the month, how we want to talk about that in the meeting. So we'll think about that a little bit. And with that, oh, great. Okay. Oh, Mary. Ms. Lynch, would you like to go? And you can just, we don't really have a podium, but if you just want to come up here and it looks like we have two, and I'm assuming Nancy's going to make a comment as well. But go ahead, just go ahead and introduce yourself.
My name is Mary Lynch, and I live at 2690 Northwest Oak Crest Drive here in Issaquah. That's out just west of here on Newport Way. I've lived here over 30 years. I also served as a citizen on the Central Area Task Force plan, where we tried to make sure that one of the goals coming out of that was creating multimodal pathways of transportation and really concentrating on putting Issaquah citizens first over pass-through traffic. With that, I'm glad that you are talking about traffic calming, because I think we need that, and to do more put more forth work on that, especially as it deals with pedestrians and multimodal and making those connections throughout the city. One of the places where I really think we still need to, we've talked about it for years and it hasn't happened, is on Front and Sunset. We need to make both of those streets more pedestrian friendly, especially at the intersection. We've talked a number of years about having a stop and doing a X cross through there. If you have not been down there, you have to go down there and sometimes wait almost 5 minutes to cross the street, which I think is totally out of character, especially when we have like now our holiday things going on. I know we have crosswalks further down on or north on Front Street, but that doesn't help if you're going to the other venues elsewhere. So it's putting through traffic over local traffic and local pedestrians. I've also heard there's some talk about on Bush making that left-hand turn not possible. For me, who lives over east or west of town, I work east. Sometimes the only way I can get across town at rush hour is to go on Bush, turn left, go that short distance down Front, and then go Newport home, because I can't get on Sunset, across Sunset, because everybody's trying through traffic is on Sunset, trying to make a left-hand turn and go south. So I think we need to, on all those pinch points, pay more attention to local traffic and local pedestrians. I also think when we're looking at through traffic, or excuse me, traffic calming, we need to look at it as a whole picture. Yes, we've now have speed bumps over on 2 streets south of Sunset. What we haven't done is anything with the alleyways. So guess where all the students and all the parent traffics are going now? There are some that are bouncing over the speed bumps, but now we have cars that are going down the alleyways that didn't go down the alleyways. And we have cars that are turning right off of Sunset in the morning, going on Alder to speed down to Second to turn left, or on to Second to get to school faster. So when we look at traffic calming, you need to look at the whole picture. Think of it as a river valley and find out if you put speed bumps someplace, they're going to go someplace else. And that's my concern with South Cove. I saw that you're looking at some things with 188. If you do something with 188, then don't do something with 192nd and 193rd. They're going to be, and they already are in the morning, speeding down there because I'm a laid off engineer that has been driving school bus for the district for 15 years now. So I know the traffic well and the traffic patterns. And parents and students are always trying to beat the buses to the schools. They always know the shortest cut. They always cut you off, whether they're experienced drivers or not. So when you look at traffic calming for an area, look at the entire area. And that gets me to a comment that I heard a staff person telling a group of business people about the fact that the new, if we get the intelligent system with this, the sales tax, we'll put it first on Front Street because we can get all this through traffic faster through town. Well, that doesn't make sense because as soon as you get out of town, what do you have? You have Hobart Road that is not wider. You've got May Valley that's coming in. Then you have further south. And so all you're going to do is spend a lot of money on Front Street and you're not speeding up traffic, but you're letting the through traffic people think they can speed up. And you need to look at, there's a lot of other areas that you could have smart signals. And I know what the smart signal that I've seen for now almost 10 years down on Lakemont and Newport Way, that works fantastic. And I, as a school bus driver, have used that intersections tremendously. And if there's no car over here, that light doesn't turn. Or if there's a long line here, it stays. And at rush hour, it stays. So those getting off I-90 can get up the hill faster. Those are the types of intersections you need to look at the smart systems, not trying to get traffic through faster. What the mayor has tried to do, and I support what she and the other council and our government people has tried to get Highway 18 complete. And that's what we need to do. But we also need to keep the semis off of Front Street. Tomorrow, Front Street will be loaded with semis. They don't mind the sign. We need somebody down turning them off onto May Valley, keeping them off of Front Street. Because tomorrow they're going to have another shutdown of Highway 18. It's a planned shutdown. Why couldn't they wait till Monday when there is no school? Don't ask me. But when we look at the smart systems, we need to think about our citizens first and pedestrians for traffic calming. Thank you.
Excuse me, what was the intersection? When you said at first, you said the really bad crosswalk timing was Front Street and, well, I just want to make
Front Street and Sunset. Yeah, and I challenge anybody to go down there and try and cross the street.
Yeah, I was gonna.
Because it's right next to hers,
weekend,
too.
Maybe next meeting, hear about the timing on it, how it's set up.
Thank you. Okay, and we do have Nancy as Nancy planning on making a comment?
Hi, I'm Nancy Davidson. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, and go ahead. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Hi, I'm Nancy Davidson. I did submit some comments in writing, and in case you had not received those, I wanted to at least build upon those. I encourage you strongly to look at the city's, what they call a traffic calming program. It was first adopted, according to what I've seen on the website, in about 2017. And a bunch of projects were identified in 2020 for implementation and approved by the city council. What we found is in 2023, they have approved a budget of $831,000 to do some improvements. But improvements that were promised, such as street crossing on Sunset and lights along Sunset between Second and the freeway off-ramp, have not occurred. In fact, in talking with city staff, it's my understanding that those are now out until the 2027 timeframe. They were promised to City Council that they would happen in 2022. And I personally find that that is a very disturbing trend. In addition, in 2024, there's $318,000 appropriated for strategic capital projects, which according to the city's budget is for things like traffic calming. So we're getting money, but we're not getting projects. I happen to live in Old Town down on Bush Street, and I've watched much of this traffic, and it's fast and it's crazy. So in the 8 a.m. timeframe, you see a lot of parents and students going very fast. We try and walk at that time in the morning, and you cannot get across Sunset. You cannot. You can walk from you can't walk from the south side of Sunset to the north side of Sunset, either in the morning or the afternoon, because the traffic is too heavy. There aren't lights. There's no flashing beacons. There's no way to get across Sunset safely without taking your life in your own hands. Many of the neighbors have spoken with city staff about this, expressing concerns, and it's clearly a problem when we're trying to get people out of cars. People that live down here cannot walk across to see friends, to go to City Hall, or to go to the theater because we cannot get across Sunset unless it's at Second. So I think traffic calming, but I'd encourage you also to think about traffic safety, because really what we're talking about is the safety of our community and the mobility of it. And as someone who also is on another city committee, that's the environmental board, we're very concerned about climate change and getting people out of their cars. And those of us that live in Old Town that have not seen the improvements that have been promised by council and by staff are having difficulties getting around down here with the traffic that's happening. So please consider the traffic calming, but please don't allow your discussions about a traffic calming program impact implementation of traffic calming projects that need to be done in this community. That's my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here and for making those comments. Yeah, just to echo that, I was just going to say that Sunset also is access to those trails too. So it is pretty treacherous to try to get across there. So, okay. So the next item on the agenda is regular business, and John is going to be, no, will you be presenting?
No.
Yeah, okay.
You just hear fun.
Oh, okay. Okay, are you ready for me to turn it over to you?
Yeah, and I think Dave has.
Oh, I'm so sorry. And you know what, Erica, help me remember, because I have a tendency to forget the people on the screen. And hi, Dave.
Small point of order, Madam Chair. Being specifically, I put on my job form that I wouldn't be here tonight, but I gonna use my traffic calming skills to get up to Snoqualmie because I have a mandatory American Legion meeting, so I have to leave now. Are we having a meeting on the 27th of December?
No.
So this is it. Okay, so I'll see everybody in the new year. I apologize, too many meetings. For me, the thing I really want to emphasize is when a meeting gets canceled like that, it throws us into, and I know it does, staff as well, but it threw me into a real curveball because now I can't make the meeting. There's not going to be another one this month, but oh well. See you all in the new year. Thank you for letting me spend a few minutes with you. I'm now headed to stop. Happy New Year. And Happy New Year.
Thank you for that. Sometimes he wasn't in my field of vision, and you kept looking over there. I thought you're looking at him. Thanks, Dave. Great. Okay. And welcome. So, okay. So for a moment, I think we had a full house.
I think we did.
Yeah.
That was great.
So that was kind of fun.
That's not for a minute.
What about,
I'm sorry.
Oh,
I always forget somebody. Okay, but that's exciting because that means we've got all the positions are filled.
is that what you mean?
We don't have no, that's not what I meant. I did forget Tom and I apologize for that. Don't tell him. But you're right. But we do now have, our roster is full. Yes, so I was mistaken, but our roster is full. We don't have alternates, but we have a full roster. Right, so that's great. Very good. Are we ready to move on to, the main general business tonight?
Let's do it.
Okay, I'm gonna turn it over to John. Thank you.
Sharing screen. Well, yeah, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm John Larson Friend. I'm the Transportation Program Coordinator here at the city. I'm also the staff liaison for this tab body. And this evening, we're here to talk about traffic calming, as you can tell from public comment. I do want to partially apologize for all the meeting, as Dave mentioned, all the meetings getting shuffled around and everything. We had some calendar mishaps over the last month or for the last meeting. So thank everyone for being here, this special meeting. And again, we do not have tab at the end of this month. This is the November, December meeting. So yeah. So to get into the traffic calming discussion, I want to open with the acknowledgement that this packet that you received this time around does look different from the one that you received in November. A lot of work went into that first version, and then a lot of work went into this second version as we've had more staff conversations about the direction that we want to take the engagement and process. So thank you for your flexibility on that as well. We know that this topic deserves intentional discussion and care to get it right for the community. It's obviously an issue that a lot of people care about. So with that, I will get started. So the purpose this evening is to introduce or reintroduce for a lot of you tab to traffic calming, describe what our current policy is, and propose our policy revamp plan. So first, I kind of wanted to start with high level, what is traffic calming? On the federal level, the Federal Highway Administration defines it as the primary purpose of traffic calming is to support the livability and vitality of residential and commercial areas through improvements of non-motorist safety, mobility, and comfort. These objectives are typically achieved by reducing vehicle speeds or volumes on a single street or street network. Traffic calming measures consist of horizontal, vertical, lane narrowing, roadside, and other features that use self-enforcing physical or psycho perception means to produce desired effects. And then under WSDOT, or the Washington State Department of Transportation, they define traffic calming as traffic calming reduces vehicle speeds by using roadway design elements like roundabouts, narrowed roads, and speed humps. Traffic calming supports the livability and vitality of residential and commercial areas by improving safety, mobility, and comfort for all road users, with special care taken for pedestrians and cyclists. So a little bit more specific on the state level than federal level. Next, we have this chart. So getting into why traffic calming? Why is this something that has been growing in popularity across the US especially? And I just wanted to start with this chart specifically. This is from the Federal Highway Administration. Basically, the data shows that people struck by vehicles traveling at speeds of 20 miles an hour or less are typically are typically not permanently or severely injured. As you go up in speed from there, injuries become more severe as those speeds go up. And then once you hit that 36 mile an hour threshold, that's the point where pedestrians are usually fatally injured. This chart is especially salient in 2023, going into 2024, as pedestrian deaths are going up nationally. Globally, they're going down, but in the US, they're going up. Some of the reasons for that could be, electric cars are heavier because of batteries. We also know that the most popular vehicles in the US are pickup trucks and SUVs, and their hoods levels are getting higher and higher. So it's harder to see over the hoods. And so there's just a whole bunch of different factors like that contributing to that. In Issaquah, we've had a focus on traffic calming for a while now. We'll get into the traffic calming policy that was put into place in 2003, has been in place since then. But during the mobility master plan process, which you all, well, the tab engaged in, included traffic calming within the goals. So under goal 1, proactive safety, the goal statement is providing safe and comfortable streets that encourage people to travel by walking, bicycling, and transit. And we actually have a specific policy 1.3 that establishes safer vehicle speeds and traffic calming and calm traffic where appropriate using proven traffic calming measures. And then we also have mobility master plan goal 2, which doesn't specifically mention traffic calming, but when it comes to quality of life, looking at the design mobility to improve public outcomes for the environment, for public health, and equitable access to resources and opportunities, specifically that emphasis on public health, because if pedestrians are hit, they are not healthy. Next, I want to invite John Mortensen, my supervisor, to talk a little bit about perception, because there is a difference between actual, like the science of safety and the perception of what safety is. So, yes, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, John. So the main point that I wanted to make on this slide is we'll get a lot of traffic calming requests, and we'll go out there, and the first thing we do is we schedule traffic counts, and we get the counts. And well, the request has a perceived issue with speeding, we'll get the counts, and it'll have the 85th percentile speed, which is where 85% of the cars are going at or below. And most of the time, the 85th percent speed is around the speed limit, which is usually 25 miles an hour. Sometimes it's even less. And so what I found in my personal life, and when we see these requests, are a lot of times it's hard as a pedestrian walking on a sidewalk to judge speed. And we had a recent one complaining about cars just going really fast. And I think the 85th percent speed was around, it was in the low 20s. And so when we make these decisions, we do want them to be data driven, because it is hard to judge just standing there. But also use the data that John was showing about how over a certain point the speed is dangerous, but also understanding that it can be hard without measuring it to judge how fast a car is going.
Thank you, John. Great, thank you. On that note, moving over to kind of what the popular perception of traffic calming is. I wanted to note that speed bumps are one of those devices that seem to be one of those highly requested pieces of, I want speed bumps in my neighborhood because of X, Y, and Z. We want to highlight that speed bumps are one of many traffic calming tools. And the way that modern traffic calming has been moving, it's thinking a little bit bigger, it's thinking a little bit more holistically. The other thing that I wanted to note is that not all traffic calming is about speeds. Talking about 85th percentile, and I'll get into more definitions around that because it's such a strange measurement. But if we're looking at speeds and not considering, extra cut through traffic or, bike and pedestrian safety, neighborhood livability, overall traffic flow, those sorts of speed measurements don't really address those types of issues that are all a part of the traffic calming mission, essentially. I also wanted to go over the kind of the general process of choosing the correct traffic calming measure, because we do have so many different types of measures that we can draw upon. And I just wanted to kind of go over those. So the first one is roadway setting. And these definitions are from the Federal Highway Administration, once again. This roadway setting is kind of, it's where is the road set? Federal Highway Administration defines this as urban versus rural. Obviously, if we're talking about Issaquah, it's mostly urban. There's a little bit of rural elements to Issaquah. But the example that they give is, the rumble strips probably aren't the right thing to put into a residential neighborhood, so we have to think about the setting of the roadway. There's also roadway type. And this is, what sort of roadway is it? Are we looking at residential? Are we looking at major or minor arterials? For example, speed tables, probably not the best type of traffic calming measure for a major or minor arterial. We also look at speed related crash history. We look at the, where, when, and what type of crashes are happening in specific spots. And, specifically, incidents at intersections should be treated differently than incidents, along, a longer straightaway. There's just going to be different types of measures that you put into place. Road users are just that. Is this the type of corridor that's mostly cars with the occasional pedestrian? Is it a pedestrian heavy intersection? Taking that sort of thing into context. Cost, of course, can be a big restraint or a big limitation depending on the specific setting. Different traffic calming measures cost different amounts of money. And finally, effectiveness. Some measures are more effective than others. For example, those speed signs that show speeds, they have been proven to be very effective, but their effectiveness can go down. So you have to weigh, are we going to spend the money to install this type of traffic calming only to see the effectiveness drop off? So just those sorts of considerations. I also wanted to touch on the difference between traffic calming and traffic control. Traffic calming is kind of, as I've been describing, a set of design and management strategies aimed at reducing vehicle speeds and improving safety for all road users, including pedestrians and bicyclists and cars. So those sorts of example or sorts of traffic calm. The traffic calming includes examples such as speed bumps, or sometimes speed humps, as they're sometimes called, raised crosswalks, road narrowing, traffic circles. Traffic control is more focused on strategies employed to regulate, guide, and manage traffic flow to ensure safety and efficiency. So that's looking at traffic signals, stop signs, yield signs, roundabouts. We've occasionally gotten requests, please put in traffic calming, put in a stop sign, and that doesn't fall within the traffic calming program. So with that introduction of kind of what traffic calming is, I really want to dive into what Issaquah's traffic calming policy is right now. So it's titled the Neighborhood Traffic Calming Program. Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I can also save questions until like completely after. I didn't know like when, sorry.
Question two.
Sure, we can pause it.
Let's pause for a
Let's
moment.
pause here, yeah.
Ask questions, because it seems like a good transition. Go ahead, Erica.
Are rumble strips like they're aimed at more rural because of the noise, or?
Yeah, rumble strips are, I don't think we would even probably include them in Issaquah policy, just because our policy is aimed at more residential type streets. So I apologize. Actually, yeah, I probably shouldn't have included rumble strips in the narrative, but I wanted to include it for the sake of example. We wouldn't want to put those sorts of things in our neighborhoods because of the noise.
Because of the noise. Okay. Thanks.
Question.
Also, it seems like to be effective, you have to have a much longer span
Yeah, exactly.
than a typical resident. I had a question, but did anyone else have a question? Would you say, so I agree, I think the Sunset Front pedestrian crossing is a mess and it is very long and ruining, but would you just had a couple slides about the difference between traffic calming and traffic flow.
Mhm.
I'm guessing, based on my understanding of what I think is traffic calming, that is bad of an issue as that is, it's not really a calming issue. It's more of a management or a timing or a flow issue. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that, yes.
Okay.
Not saying that, yeah, I'm saying there's nothing I want to look at, but just,
Right.
and that's why I asked earlier about maybe at our next meeting, we could, as an example intersection, talk about how the light timing is structured. Do they triggered by in-road sensors or something else.
And that could be a conversation or some sort of update around ITS possibly. We'll have to take a look at that.
But it wouldn't be included in any traffic calming.
Not technically, no, this policy specific.
That's for another day.
Any other questions before we?
We have, Issaquah also has a traffic control policy, I assume.
I believe, do we? That's a great
When
question.
you say traffic control.
Well, you just shared the difference between traffic control and traffic calming. Do we have, we're talking Issaquah traffic calming policy. Is there also some equivalent policy for traffic control?
That's a new ITS.
Well, I would say we have standards that we follow for that, not necessarily a policy. Now, we do have a level of service at intersections as a policy. That,
There also are some elements under the ITS plan that are developing, or at least having us work through some policy where, stuff like leading pedestrian interval, where pedestrians get to go first before turning traffic, we get to go out of signal. So there's some things that we're going to look into and get more of a feel of the community and the council as we work through those. So there is some policy that's going to be developed around it, but it generally does default to standards.
Maybe we should just pause for a moment and introduce the newest stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you guys were in the room. We introduced him.
Yeah,
Go for it. Nick Green, I've been with the city for about a year now, but just last month stepped into the traffic signal operations engineer position, replacing Isabel. And so John is continuing with tab, but I'm here as the kind of the signal elements of things. And
and here for fun.
Okay.
I want to hear this discussion. I've worked in traffic calming for years now. And so I was interested to hear your guys' feedback and position on it. So.
Thank you. Okay. I think we're ready to carry on. Thanks.
All right, let's dive into our policy. So the current policy it's the neighborhood traffic calming program. It was adopted in 2003. I know there's some language out there, I think on the website, something about 2017. There's been discussions that have happened over time, but the official policy that we have in place is the 2003 policy. It addresses local access streets, as it's called within the policy. And those are basically defined as all roadways that are not principal arterials, minor arterials, or collectors. So residential streets, it's the only thing that's left over within that category. The policy includes this map. This is a 2003 map. As you'll notice, Highlands, not very built out. Talus, not very built out. I actually went into Google Earth last week to see what it looked like in 2003, and it's mostly dirt in those areas. There were a few houses that were allowed to be occupied, I think in 2003, 2004. But that at the time of the writing of this policy, this was it. It was basically all that was allowed under this policy is everything that is a street that's not filled in bold, put it that way. We've inferred from this map that any other residential streets fall under this policy, but this is the map that has been within the policy for the last 20 years. I also want to note that because of the no collectors rule, all these bold streets, which includes the highway, but there's a lot of streets on considered collectors that we can't do anything on. So we will receive traffic calming requests through our system. For example, I don't know, along Mount Olympus up in Squawk. If we receive a request technically under our current policy to slow down traffic on Mount Olympus Drive, we couldn't do anything about it under this policy. It just doesn't fall under. Yes.
That's just an Issaquah policy. There's not any other overarching emergency or state law or other kind of So it's just related to this policy.
Correct.
Any other map questions? I love map questions. So. Great. So let's dive into the policy process. So the policy is divided into, well, it's divided into several sections, but at very basic, it's divided into two different phases. And this is, so basically I'm going to describe how the program was designed to work under the 2003 conditions and resources that were available at the time. I will touch on how we do it now, but I'm just going to describe how it was written, basically. So first, this first phase is focused on more non-physical fixes. So basically, there's a citizen action request form, and there's a brochure that was developed. A citizen would walk into, I assume, City Hall and say, "Hi, I would like to request traffic calming on my street." And whoever was working the front desk would say, "Great, here's a brochure and an action form. Please fill this out and read this brochure." The form would be submitted, and then traffic analysis would be conducted by Public Works Engineering. Using speed counters, if a problem is found based on that 85th percentile speed, which I'll get to in the next slide, then basically the policy would call for implementing striping and sign changes specifically. After that, if there's no measurable change, there would be a neighborhood speed watch program instituted. Very basically, the police would provide a speed trailer for that street. Volunteers in the neighborhood would be trained to monitor speeds. They would also be asked to submit driver information for follow-up by police. And then after that 6-month period, if all of that is unsuccessful, then you would move to phase 2. Phase 2 is the physical piece. So I would call this the actual traffic calming device analysis, essentially, or phase. And so then staff would then conduct, an analysis of the street, and then they would choose devices, and then they would mail surveys out to the neighborhood around who the devices would affect or along that corridor or street. A certain percent of residents must consent to the installation. It's dependent on device under the current traffic calming standards. It's mostly a 60% approval. There are 2 devices that call for a 70% approval, so it's not consistent. Then they would be installed, and then there would be an evaluation after 1 year. So that's the policy. Yeah.
So approval is based on who lives in that neighborhood. And in this current policy, because it's residential only, there's no basically through traffic roads that are included.
Right.
Okay, so then that makes sense why
Collectors. Yeah.
people that are otherwise using the road aren't included in the.
Correct. Yeah. It's theoretically the people who are using the road
Also live in that neighborhood.
and they would probably be complaining about it. Another.
They're also, but in the case of collectors, stakeholders are far more than just the neighborhood people who live in it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just wanted to clarify something in phase 1.
Yeah.
Where it says the traffic analysis field review. So you're saying if the speeds are already under 25 miles per hour, at 85 percentile speed, you don't do anything? Is that true?
Well, I can answer that question with this slide. So basically, the 85th percentile speed, as John mentioned, it refers to the speed at which 85% of the vehicles on a street are traveling at or below. So I was trying to think of the best way to how to explain this. So putting out traffic counters, which counts how fast vehicles are going. It keeps track of how many vehicles and what speed they're going. And if 85% of vehicles are going, let's see, say it's a 25 mile an hour and it's the 85th percentile is 33 miles an hour. That means 85% of vehicles are traveling at 33 miles an hour or under. There, 15% are going faster than that, but the 85th percentile is that threshold. Which gets me to the second part of this slide. Under the current policy, for the most part, there's some couple of weird traffic devices that we have kind of left off here because it's hard to explain or understand. But for the most part, the 85th percentile has to be 10 miles an hour over in residential areas and in school zones, and 8 miles an hour next to parks. So that means in order for this physical device phase of traffic calming to be triggered in Issaquah, 85th percentile has to be 35 miles an hour or over,
Okay,
which I have my own feelings about. But yeah,
so,
does that explain?
yeah,
Yes,
that
yes.
explains
The
exactly.
answer is yes.
Yeah, but
Nothing happened.
nothing
Nothing.
happens. Yeah,
And it has no bearing on volume.
or the size of the vehicle, so that person who came, like, what was that, in October? And was upset about, 7th Avenue.
Mhm.
He specifically said they were heavy trucks that were going from Safeway and doing deliveries that were driving on there instead of going on to Newport Way first.
Right.
And so that doesn't address that issue.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Kind of gets at your point, I think.
Were you
about-
there? I know.
I was not,
Cynthia
but
wasn't.
I didn't think I know. I heard about this issue.
So what percent, you mentioned earlier that a lot of them, when they go and actually do the study, they find that they're 25 miles per hour or below. So what percent are excluded because they're at 11 plus miles an hour, or sorry, 9 or less? So you get 100 requests a year, I'm making up numbers, right? 100 requests a year. And you go and you do this, and then you find a certain percent of them. They are, the 85th percentile point is at, just exclude parks for now, 9 miles an hour above the speed limit or less. And so those aren't included right now. And if you change that threshold, some portion of those would be included. Is that like, like if you bring the number down to 5 miles an hour, all of a sudden you double the amount that are included, or it actually only moves the needle a tiny bit? Because that's an important thing to know when it comes to, if most of the time they're within 5, then that's a big difference. And if most of the time they're really at like 9 or 8. And so we just need to think about that.
Since I have taken over the program, I would say that, well, I addressed this, I think maybe the next slide. Yeah. Since I have taken over the program last year, I have never made it to phase 2. We have done tons of different studies on different roads that people have requested. It's never been on a residential street has there been a 35 mile an hour or greater threshold met. Or next, I don't think we've done any next to parks.
So I might be missing some off the top of my head. I can think of 2 examples and they were both on collectors.
Yeah.
Talus Drive. Cars go the speed limit heading up the hill. The speed limit is 25 and they're usually having about 35. And 12th heading up towards Squawk. Very similar situation.
So I'm still very interested, and maybe this is something to come back next time we talk this to see. I would like to see, like, if that number was, we can just look at the 10 mile an hour one to make it easy. If it was 9, you'd get this additional percent. If it was 8, this additional percent, because I also don't want us to overreact. We see 10 and we're like, let's make it 0, right? Well, it turns out that really our issue is this 7 or 8 mile per hour plus there's some demarcation point. So I'd be interested in seeing that. I'm always, when I hear these things, I do pick up a little bit on it. Sometimes sounds like, people are driving 35. There's also this other question of, maybe this is a more important road for through traffic, whatever that we think, but that's a separate point.
Yeah, that's fair. And just off the top of my head, I would say for the vast majority of our studies, they're between 19 miles an hour and I would say like 27 miles an hour, probably.
Which most people would consider a very reasonable speed. I think we're all more concerned about the ones that are at 9 and we're missing those, like.
And they are there. There's one specific road that we did a study on, which we can get into specific examples and which roads they are at a later date probably. But the threat they met, I think it was like 34.2 miles an hour.
Yes, so yeah, those are the ones we're clearly good.
Yeah. So they do exist. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, we'd mentioned 7th. That is a good example of one that is just under the threshold. When you consider the speed limit's 20 miles an hour because you're near the school.
Yeah, and the reason why I think that 10 might be such an important number is it's, I think there's always that 9-year fine, 10-year mine or whatever. There's a lot of people that believe that there's this like, once you go, even I think our speeding laws, there's certain numbers where once you go above, it's significantly different. That's why I really care about being careful about that tuning as opposed to reacting quickly.
Are there any other triggers for the phase 1 to go into action? Because I feel like, especially like I drive to Issaquah every morning, like high school, and a lot of times traffic's barely moving, but there's so much traffic volume that it could be difficult for pedestrians to cross the road and bicyclists to navigate the street safely. So are there any other triggers that can be implemented to help maybe focus on other issues that could need fixing by traffic calming?
That is a great question. Under the current policy, no, it's all speed. But that's also something that we would love to look at for the new policy.
But a lot of that would fall under traffic control anyways. You're talking light
some of them,
crossings, bike lanes, is that all traffic control or at least outside of what traffic calming is?
It depends. I mean, yeah, it depends on the situation. Yeah.
I was just gonna say something that, the policy could not necessarily have to be speed. It could be the type of vehicles and the number of vehicles. And I don't know if that counter measures the size of the vehicles. Does it? Like, if it's a truck that's going on a road or?
Generally, when we do traffic counts, we get a classification of vehicles. So typically, I mean, depends on the device that we deploy.
Right.
But we can see passenger vehicles, and that's just what everyday folks are driving. Pickup trucks, SUVs, passenger cars. Those are small enough that's a little bit harder to distinguish. There's some equipment that can be based on the wheelbase, but and that's mostly what is being looked at. When you see the tubes on the road and it drives over it, that can measure the distance between the wheelbase and tell you the general type of vehicle that is based on it. Now, that's not also guaranteed. Like you take a school bus, that platform is an industrial platform called the SU-30 that's put on multiple vehicles. So we see a school bus go across. We don't necessarily know if that's a box truck or a school bus, but we have general classifications that we do get through that system.
So based on our discussion today, we were gonna maybe develop a different policy and not have speed being the only defining issue. Is that what you're thinking?
It would be excellent to do that, yes. All right. Any other 85th?
Bruce, how many requests do you get here roughly off the top of your head, and how many finish phase 1?
That's a good question. I think, look,
I'm just trying to get a sign.
I have a spreadsheet in my head. Yeah.
Doesn't.
No, it's probably 10 or 20, I would say, that go through the process, at least through my process. I get a lot of neighborhood traffic requests is the designation that I oversee, which is our neighborhood traffic calming. I would say 3/4 of those end up going to police because they're just requests about, hey, someone was speeding on my street and I don't like it, but for the other 1/4 of requests, we'll go through those. I think the last year probably had 15 or 20 different speed studies done. So
It's not too many.
not too many. Not too many.
15 or 20 is not. But are they different streets or are they the
Yes.
same ones every year?
That is, oh, actually, that's a good point. So we will get requests from different people in the same area. And we use the studies that we have done to answer their question, because very basically, when it comes to traffic speeds, there is also a popular public perception that, oh, your speed study was done in 2019. Well, can you do an updated one? It won't change very much at all, even if we spent the resources on it. So I think the oldest study I've probably used is 2017. It's probably the oldest one that I've used, but they're reliable. So
Oh, Erica's got her hand up, and I think Julian had his hand up, and I don't know who did it first. Erica, go ahead. Can you hear us? Well,
Yeah, no, I can hear everyone great.
Okay.
I was gonna ask, and maybe we'll get to this at a later part in the presentation, about the 60% threshold, like neighborhood buy-in, kind of in order for this to even start. Like how often has that been like a barrier to something starting, or just because I know like broadly citizen engagement can be difficult, so I'm just curious like if that's been an issue or not.
it's a great question because I've never made it that far.
I've made it that far in other communities. And I've also implemented phase 2 elements that then we had massive community pushback after they went in, and we had to go back and take elements out. And that's what in that community drove to, hey, we want, this percentage of the community involvement. And so they can be very divisive within a neighborhood, and it's a lot of money and time for us to put them in. And so we want to make sure everyone is in agreement that, hey, this is beneficial to the neighborhood before you take the time and spend the money to do all that.
Julian.
Yeah, so one of our public commenters was mentioning this non-capital projects, budget that we have. What is it, like 300,000 or whatever?
It was 300,000 this year. Next year, it's, I want to say 218,000, give or take.
And so these are not really being spent.
Oh, they're being spent. Yeah, so that was an item that we brought to the tab and we asked what to prioritize. And so the new LED signs for no right on red at East Lake Sammamish Parkway and Southeast 56th, those were installed with that project. And the direction we were given was to work on sidewalk gaps. So we've got a project on Andrews, which is filling in a sidewalk gap. Another one on Juniper where there was sidewalk, but there was a gap in the shared use path for the Maple Juniper Trail. Got that working, under construction, near completion. And there's a sidewalk gap on 2nd Avenue where a little shared use path was constructed. So
From the same pot as the small strategic projects. It's not its own standalone line item. Is that correct?
the small strategic, oh, no, we don't have a line item for traffic calming.
It comes from the same pot as the small strategic.
It can.
And I have been told that, or I think that budget's spoken for 2027. Because I asked that question, like, hey, what if something popped up and we need to pay for it?
So we do have it spoken for 24, 23 and 24. 25, we don't have it.
Maybe 25 felt like 27.
Yeah.
when I heard that.
And I will say, well, actually, I'll wait 2 slides because I'll talk a little bit about what we've done in the past about traffic calming.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Like, that's that.
Okay, great.
Okay.
All right, so yeah, we've touched on a little bit of this in the questions, but so the way that this policy, so it was written in 2003, different time. Nowadays, the way the policy is implemented or how it runs is it's all virtual now. There's no form that you have to walk into City Hall and grab. There's no brochure. anymore because we just use our quick fix system and people report it. There is a lack of resources for speed trailer deployment. I finally, after a year of asking police for a speed trailer, I finally got one deployed at college like 2 months ago. I asked, hey, how long could you put it out for? And the policy says 6 months. How about a month? They laughed at me. So I think it was like 2 weeks, a week, 2 weeks max. And that's just due to police resources and whatnot. And then, as I mentioned before, I've never made it to phase 2 since I've taken the program over. I also, after I put this slide together, I also want to note that going back through the original policy and how it's written, it's not even that I haven't made it to phase 2. I haven't even made it past the initial 85th percentile data collection. So it's not, we haven't even gotten to like the striping or sign portion, but I think we mentioned that. And I want to mention that, like, even if we did make it past that stage, I think we would have to have a very serious discussion about that neighborhood speed watch program and how that could even happen, because I think it would probably be somewhat problematic, but anyway, I'll leave that there. Important notes. Again, the current policy is focused on speeds. It only uses strategies and mitigations that are one-sided. It really focuses on speed. As we mentioned, it doesn't have the pass-through rate or anything to mitigate anything. And now I will pass it over to John to talk about some of the history, because he knows a lot more about the history of this program than I do.
Yeah, so we actually have been talking a lot about how we have not reached the thresholds, but we've actually done some traffic calming even in situations where we have not met those thresholds. And wanted to go over a little bit of the history of what we've done. I'm going to actually talk about what we did in the Highlands, what we did in Old Town, and then I've got a few other things I'll mention as well that aren't on there. So in the Issaquah Highlands, I believe this was in 2018, there was at a public meeting about traffic and heard a wide variety of traffic concerns. And some of them were about speeds, some of them were about other safety, which were the traffic control. And so what we did is we worked with the community up there, with some residents, with the homeowners association, and we did a number of things. We worked with the Issaquah Highlands IHCA, that's the HOA up there, and we got pedestrian flags installed at some pedestrian crossings. There were some locations where there were cars turning right on red and there wasn't very good sight distance, so we made it so that way there'd be no rights on reds. We did a education campaign. There were signs all over the Highlands. People to, I can't remember the exact message, but things like drive with care type things. We have deployed temporary radar speed signs on 24th and 25th. Those are 2 residential streets that have faster traffic. Cars go close to 30 miles an hour there, some spots a little bit above 30 miles an hour. We also painted 25 miles an hour to remind on the road in big numbers so people could see the speed, and installed reflectors that, because one of the things we had was cars turning the wrong way on the one-way streets. So we installed reflectors where if you went the wrong way, it would be red instead of white. And we fixed what we call the zipper merge. So if you're heading up Park Drive towards like Blakely Hall, where the cars would merge, where you go from 2 lanes to 1, it actually wasn't designed to meet standard. And a lot of times neighbors would be racing each other to try and get to the merge point. And so we fixed it, and it functions a lot better. Now, Old Town was also right around the same time period. And the problem in Old Town is that traffic gets so congested, usually on Front, 2nd, and Sunset. And so what people end up doing is they'll turn off onto Bush and 6th and sometimes Andrews or Alder, and they'll cut through the neighborhood. And this was a situation where the speeds did not meet the 35 miles an hour. We've never had speeds that fast in Old Town. I went this morning and I looked on Bush, we had speeds of about 29 miles an hour back before we did any of the traffic calming. And so we did something a little bit different there. We did a pilot project where we installed all kinds of different temporary traffic control device or traffic calming devices. We got rubber speed humps. Sometimes they were in a speed table where you go up and it'd be flat and then back down. We had speed cushions, so that way there'd be an opening in between the devices. We tried a speed circle. We tried chicanes, which is where you add curve and you make it uncomfortable, where basically you have to slow down, because if you don't, and two cars are going at each other, they would hit each other. It narrows up the road. And so we measured the effectiveness of the different devices. For example, the chicanes work great, but on-street parking is a premium in Old Town, so the community absolutely hated them because it took away parking. The speed humps were by far the most popular, and so that's what we ended up going with for the majority of the neighborhood. In the end, it looked like the speeds went from about 29 miles an hour and they dropped about 3 miles an hour. So now it's 25.8 was the most recent data that I ended up finding. And that was on Bush. Now there's other spots too. I just did a spot check on Bush.
Did the flow change?
So initially it did, but now it's back up higher than it was before.
So was there action taken to resolve the actual root cause, being the backup that was causing people to divert?
Oh, what a great question. We have worked on it. So in the morning, and there's more problems, because in the afternoon there's a problem. But in the morning, what we found is the problem was the traffic heading to school, because the middle school and high school are right next to each other, and their bell times are 10 or 15 minutes apart. And what we found is when cars get to Evans, there's parking off of Evans, and the buses turn at Evans, and there's a very busy crosswalk at Evans. So everything kind of centers around Evans, where the buses will be waiting to turn left, and that'll back up cars. Then the bus finally turns left, and then a group of kids will go across the crosswalk, and that backs up cars some more. And then a parent will decide that they're going to turn left because they want to drop off their kid, and their kid doesn't want to be seen with their parent. And so they'll turn left. But while they're turning left, at the same time, cars are leaving because the kids who aren't embarrassed by their parents, their parents have dropped off their kids and they are heading back to the north. And so while they're waiting, while the cars are heading to the north, they're waiting for their left. And it just keeps backing up further and further. And it reaches Sunset, and then it starts heading towards the Highlands, and then cars start cutting through onto Bush, and then it starts backing up onto Bush, and it makes the shape of an F, which describes kind of the way traffic's flowing. So we have done quite a bit of things to try and improve the situation. We actually made it so that way only buses during the morning commute can turn left, because they need to for the bus circulation. But what we didn't want was for the people who are parking back there, or the parents of embarrassed kids, to be turning left there. We also installed a gate so that way during the school year, the Darst neighborhood isn't getting cut through traffic because people were they're turning onto Darst instead of onto Evans. And we worked with the school district to change the circulation inside the school, made some improvements. We made it so that way there's no right on red leaving the school. And the reason for that is to try and give a bigger gap for the school buses to turn left. I'm going to say it helped. It didn't solve the problem. Another problem that we do have is the queue from the left turning traffic going from Sunset to Second, that the left turn lane's not long enough. And so what ends up happening is, so for example, let's say you're wanting to go from the Highlands to the community center. Or maybe you're gonna go work out or play pickleball or something. And the traffic on Sunset that's turning left onto Second is backed up so far that you can't go, I guess maybe I shouldn't have said going to the community center, but let's say you're going to the library. But it's backed up so far that you can't go straight on Sunset because the queue is blocking it. Now, we don't have a fix for that right now, but that is another problem that does cause that. And I will also say that of our traffic signals in the city, one of our worst and maybe our worst performing signal is Sunset in front too. So it's a difficult traffic area. And so the residents do get the cut through traffic. Did I answer that?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
Thank you.
So
Okay.
definitely encourages, I think this is infinitely interesting. We do have a luxury of time mostly tonight, but we do want to make sure we have enough time to talk about some of the goals and some of the higher level issues, because it's easy to dive into these very interesting details, especially it's so front and center for so many of us, but thank you for that.
Okay, so let me go. I'm going to take 2 more minutes to talk about other things. We do have the safety bundle. It is part of the community investment strategy that is using ARPA funds to try and improve safety throughout the city. And there's a number of safety improvements throughout the city, and one of them will be a raised crosswalk on 12th at Furwood. That's a location where we do have a pedestrian crossing and lots of like 35-mile-an-hour traffic. So we're going to try and calm traffic at that crosswalk. And on Newport Way, between SR 900 and Southeast 54th Street, we've got a big corridor project that will be doing a lot of things to try and slow traffic down to get it to go closer to, or to get it to go 25 miles an hour. The Newport Way was once a state highway, and sometimes people drive it as it's still a state highway instead of the urban street that it's become. And we have installed a crosswalk at the King County Trailhead. The corridor project does have more raised intersections as well. And so I guess those are 3 examples of where, despite the current policy, we have done something or are going to do something. Where in Newport Way, we've got a raised intersection. On 12th, we're going to put a raised crosswalk. And in Old Town, we did put speed humps, even though we did not meet the speed threshold.
What about using static radar stations? Don't they discourage drivers to slow down and achieve what we're looking for?
Well, the feed speed, like the signs that we have that show how fast someone's going.
Not signs, I mean, like the cameras, the speed cameras you have in school areas.
Oh, they give tickets.
Yeah, whether they give tickets or it's something that controls the drivers, they would know they would be fined if they exceed a certain speed limit. So I haven't heard that into all of the solution. Is that not common to be used?
So in Washington State, it is a new thing where you can do it outside of a school zone. Up until, I don't know, maybe a year or 2 ago, it was only allowed in school zones. And so as a city, we have not evaluated a policy towards radar, or not radar, yeah, the speed cameras. But we do have one on Second in the school zone, but we have not looked at it since the state law changed.
Jumping off that point, I was interested to see was spending the summer in Issaquah. Some of the villages there, some of the cities there have corridor speed cameras where they measure, instead of measuring the speed at one location.
Average speed cameras.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They measure, they measure the speed going throughout the entire town. If you see to go driving down that fast, then they mail you.
Interesting.
That's one way of, the driver avoiding seeing the post of the speed camera. So they have like different posts on different distances, and they calculate the average. And once he exceeds that, he gets fined.
Thanks for sharing.
So I just wanted to make a statement. So Newport Way is like an arterial or a collector?
A minor arterial.
And so then, but you did do traffic calming there, even though the traffic calming policy mentioned you don't do that on arterials, right?
Yes.
So you don't always follow.
Well, I think
That's
that's
what I'm trying to say.
yes. And no, I'm glad you brought that up because that is one of the things is there are inconsistencies.
It was important to do that on Newport Way.
Right. And is it, I guess the question that I've always had in my mind is it fair to one neighborhood to be told no, because we're versus another neighborhood gets it? I mean, I want it to be a fair policy.
How do you make it fair?
So then once you start talking materials and other or should transport from point to point, then it may benefit that direct neighborhood, but it hurts everyone else that uses that. At least the WashDOT policy seemed to recognize that the main users of our roads are cars, and that we need to be thoughtful about trying to achieve, goals of safety and pedestrian and other usage, while recognizing the fact that there are cars using it. So that's where, like, when I hear like the immediate, like, oh, we'll just slow cars down. We talk about, oh, for climate. Well, if you're having cars sit at light after light after light, burning fuel, that's not good for the environment, right? So I certainly overall, we get to it. I think it's important that we have a balanced policy that's thoughtful about all of the users and what the true intent is.
Erica, go ahead.
So like the 2003 policy, we never hit the threshold for something to be implemented, but then like John just mentioned about how like things were done in certain neighborhoods. And is there like, what's like the through line, I guess, like any like common themes between like we received X amount of complaints or whatever? Like I know you kind of just told us, like gave us this history, but I guess if we get like even just a bullet list of like, this is what we as staff like heard, so this is why we changed things, like I think that could help us as a board then if we're like giving suggestions on how we want to maybe like reshape things, like that would help to see like, okay, what were like the guiding principles that staff used when the changes were made, even though like no neighborhoods ever actually hit the requirements from the 2003 policy.
Yeah, we can provide that at future meetings. I will say off the top of my head in Old Town, it was the issue was the cut through traffic, not the speed. And that's why we did the traffic calming on Newport Way between SR 900 and Southeast 54th. The main reason for that is it was a former state highway. We had a pedestrian fatality back in 2015, and the corridor has changed tremendous amounts since then. There's been lots of development and a lot more pedestrians and bicycles. And so as Newport Way has gone from a rural 2-lane road to a urban street, that the change was made to try and get traffic to reflect the new environment.
That actually brings this question. I'm gonna play tag them. Were these specific projects that you were talking about, were they related to any larger projects that were going on around it, or were they just standalone projects addressing specific issues?
So Newport Way, it's the whole corridor,
Right.
about a mile long of looking at it as a whole corridor. The Old Town was looking at all of Old Town, or well, I shouldn't say all of Old Town, but primarily looking at Alder, Andrews, Bush, Sixth, basically from Sixth to Second, from Bush to Alder. And then the safety bundle, and that was more of a spot location, just a unique situation of having a marked crosswalk, which can actually, from a pedestrian safety point of view, be dangerous, that we wanted some way, and knowing that the cars were traveling 10 miles, more than 10 miles an hour over, that was more of a unique situation. The other ones were looking more holistically at an area.
I think that's a really interesting thing to be thinking about as we're moving forward with this policy rewrite too. For one of my project, I'm working on a corridor project right now, and one of the questions that our consultant asked us was, can we do traffic calming here? It's technically a collector. And I didn't really have a specific answer because it would be attached to a specific project as opposed to a citizen request. So anyway, just wanted to mention that. Any other questions before I move into the next final phase of the presentation? Great. Okay, so I included in the packet a memo that describes basically how we want to move forward from here. This was not included in the November version of the packet. This is a newer portion of what we're looking at. Because again, we really want to take specific care to get this right. So we put together a specific kind of loose timeline of what points that we want to hit on the way to council, essentially. So I'll run through those really quickly before we have a conversation at the end here. So first, after this meeting. So after this meeting, we plan to have a staff collaborators review. We are going to conduct internal discussions across departments, and we're going to invite fire and Issaquah School District, for example, into those conversations. So it won't just be city; it'll be a little bit more regionally minded as well. And we really need to understand kind of the current on the ground impacts of how the existing policy is working within the community. And we want to hear from people with expertise within their fields. We want to talk to our maintenance crew. We want to talk to fire. We want to talk to all those different stakeholders. Then we plan to come back here to TAB. We'll return with that input that we gather, and hopefully we will review that and work with you all to identify areas of the current program that need adjustment. And of course, we'll take into consideration the comments that you'll make in a few minutes here. And then we'll move into that policy adjustment and comparative analysis. I've already been doing some of this over the last year, but we wanted to kind of formalize the process. And so basically that means that using the collaborator feedback and your feedback, evaluate accepted traffic calming methods that are kind of out there in the industry and the world. And also look at other programs, look at other cities, and see what other cities are doing and kind of compare it to ours and start kind of piecing together things. We also want to engage in a public comment process because this is such a opinionated, passionate, type of issue. We want to hear from the community on what they're thinking about. We've already heard from a couple of people even this evening, and as many of you know, having been on TAB, we don't get that many public commenters. So I think even having two kind of is a good indication. Finally, we'll take all of that. We'll start drafting a new traffic calming policy. And then we'll return to tab for review, discussion, and hopefully approval. And then we'll take it on to mobility and infrastructure and council. With that, we're at 7:24, so we have plenty of time. I really wanted to open up the floor to all of you. You've all asked really good questions and made great inquiries and all of that. But I really wanted to kind of open this up to a fairly open discussion about what do you want us as staff to be keeping in mind as we proceed into this next phase? And that can include personal interests and your opinions, your own objectives, whatever. It's like, I'm happy to hear from any level. So I'll leave it there and open it up.
Micah has his hand up, but I definitely want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to share. So if you don't volunteer, I'll volunteer you, just because I want to make sure everybody has something to contribute. Go ahead, Micah.
So I mentioned these earlier. I just want to mention them during this portion for the purpose of like the minutes. So I think it's important that we recognize the balanced use policy, and that includes the fact that the majority user of basically every road is cars for now, likely cars for the foreseeable future, right? So we want to recognize that there is an impact there. Kind of along with that, we talk about getting public comment. I think that we might struggle, or you might struggle to get public comment from people that are just driving through because I think what's going to be, people are going to talk about expanding the types of roads that are covered. I'm expecting that. And so how do we make sure that we're getting public comment, not just from the people that are walking on the road and maybe live in the neighborhood, but also people that use that to get to and from work or to and from school. And then just going back to what I said kind of at the beginning about data, I think it's important to, and John mentioned it, to make data-driven decisions. So if we have data that shows that there's this, we're missing a lot of them that are in this 7-mile-an-hour range or 8-mile-an-hour range. I'd rather move to that than just go, oh, let's go down to 0. So that data like that is important to make a structured decision.
Just going through this whole thing, I think it's also to look at, traffic use at 10 miles per hour. I know Seattle has 5 mile per hour, 5 mile per hour plus limiter there. So that might be. I would think that most these. So you're missing a lot of the obvious things are going below 10, but so I think that would be a good thing to consider. The other thing is also just including more factors, right? And so I think collision history might be a good one to include. I mean, for a lot of these projects that we consider are in residential areas, so you might not have any collision history per se, but having some measure related to near misses or something like that, related to that, along with the pedestrian just walking along, having that be incorporated as part of the criteria. And then also just the street geometry, because I know some cities, they prioritize projects that don't, proposed projects that don't have a curb, or the street is wider than 25 feet, I think. So yeah, having street geometry, collision history, or something like that.
I was just going to say that not just speed being the criteria. And I did mention that before, if there are more trucks using a road and it's in a residential neighborhood, that should be reflected somehow. And then I was wondering, oh, well, if some streets have more pedestrians on them and they don't necessarily have those sidewalks. Is there a way to put that in the equation somehow? And that's rather subjective. You can't really count people walking on a street, you know, that doesn't have sidewalks as easily, so we would have to do a survey, and I suppose that would be inconclusive, but I think you can't just look at the cars and the speed to think about traffic calming. Would more people walk instead of being stuck in a traffic jam, you know, waiting to get to the high school? Is there a way to maybe have people drop their, you know, kids off easier instead of trying to make a left turn somewhere? Maybe there's other solutions also. So that's my thoughts.
I'd like to say in the regard to the school left turns, a lot of times with like the no left turn limit, it's very impractical, especially for people parking on Evans Street and the gravel lots. And then also the street before where there's a church lot where I park. A lot of times it can be really impractical to go all the way around. So like a lot of my friends and stuff I know don't follow the no left turn limit because it adds like 5, maybe even 10 minutes depending on traffic. You have to go all the way around. And then also when going all the way around, that left turn there can be kind of sketchy sometimes when you have the pressure of like 8 people behind you and then all the oncoming traffic. That can be a lot of pressure, especially for newer drivers.
This gets to a point I've made many times about traffic calming is a lot of these measures, a lot of what we talk about sounds awful anti-driver. We talk about narrowing roads. You know that bridge in Seattle that's like super narrow? It's like 3 lanes both directions. I hate that. Everyone I know hates that.
It's
It's the one that after you, if you take the tunnel and you keep going, so narrow, right? And I was behind a bus that just drove through 2 lanes. They were just like, I don't care. I'm just going through. It's like, it seems like a good idea. You know, like left turns, right? If we say, well, this is going to help traffic, but then it's going to drive people to go do something else to get around it, right? So this is where I just go back to really need to be very balanced in the policy to understand these impacts to drivers as well as other users.
You know, and I would like to know, you know, it sounded like Nancy Davidson spoke and said that they were promised some kind of changes. I mean, I think the board should kind of know what they were promised, you know?
So part of that's a misunderstanding, and part of it's something that's going to be done either this month or next month. So as part of it were the curb bulb outs at Second and Bush, and installing street lights at Second and Bush and along Sunset at certain intersections. And that's the ones that are going to be installed now at horrible lead times to get street lights. We ordered these things. We've been waiting. PSC has them finally, and so they're going to be installing them. And so the miscommunication was that the neighborhood thought that there's going to be a rectangular rapid flashing beacon at Second and Bush, and the project was to install the curb bulb out, then evaluate it, make a data-driven decision. Do we put in the rectangular rapid flashing beacon or not? And we completed that evaluation now. Part of the confusion was someone went on vacation, someone was filling in, told people we're going to be installing it when we weren't. So it was a miscommunication, but we did evaluate it and we are going to be installing the rectangular rapid flashing beacon. So it's
okay.
A little bit of a miscommunication there and just unfortunate lead times in order to get lights.
Erica?
I've got a lot, like stuff I wrote down when I was like reading the policy and going through the packet and stuff, but I do want to second, I think Julian had said, mentioned like if there's a way to measure near misses, like I know, like we know like where we'll know where accidents happen, where fatalities happen, but man, I work from home. the amount of horns I hear like on my street. I live on 10th Avenue. It like in the Highlands. It's residential. It's not, but for whatever reason, people just aren't good drivers here. So anywho, that's me bringing, I guess we want, everything, right? Personal opinions, but also like trying to bring a broader lens to this. I was focused, I think, more on as we're reshaping maybe like input, and it sounds like that's already happened just as, between like 20 years now, like we don't do paper forms. It sounds like it's going through the Find It, Fix It app a lot of the time. Love that. I have like questions about like language access. And it sounds like we haven't even gotten to like phase 2 when like surveys go out and things like that. But I guess if we could focus like on, I know we have the data for like what, like the top spoken languages in the city. But I guess when it comes to like we're doing like targeted things in neighborhoods, if we have the data for like that census tract or something, like I guess, yeah, making it as accessible as possible language wise is great. Also, if we do still do any kind of paper mailers for like whatever process, because I know like some people are going to prefer that, right? Like not everyone has the access to technology. If we're like including like paid postage on that, I think you're going to get a higher rate of return like we do with ballots, right? Like an election mail. And then I think like Jerry brought this up with that, like I wrote down like, is there a process for kind of like reviewing like legacy areas where like people who like they just barely like they were under the threshold, and so they kind of have to keep resubmitting their requests, etc. Like I guess like do we have a process for that moving forward? So just some of the things that were going through my head as I was reading all this.
Thanks, Erica. What about you, Hanny? What do you share?
I live in the Highlands, and you've mentioned the Highlands. I've seen a few times when kids were trying to cross the park drive. It's not a problem just speed, it's the vision or the perception of the driver when he sees a kid crossing. So I've seen a near misses a couple of times when they were using the flag. So the driver hardly can see them. It's normally successful when they press the button. There are some pedestrian crossing where you have these flashes. So I guess more of these flashes, like pedestrian, when he tries to cross, he presses the button, waits for a few seconds, and then everybody sees that. But the flags, I've seen a couple of near misses with these flags. Maybe they help, but not enough. And it's not just the speed, as I said, it's the perception of the driver. He just sees people crossing in front of him. So maybe more of these flashes or can be taken into consideration.
So it sounds like there's a number of people. I would echo what Erica and Julian just said about other, and I guess you as well, right? Other measures that are linked to safety incidents, whether that be a fatal accident, a car collision, a pedestrian collision, whether that is like visibility, right, which is probably a factor in safety incidents, or near misses or collisions. All of those are in some way representative of this is a place where something could happen or has happened. And so even if maybe it doesn't trigger the 7 mile per hour, whatever, right, it might also still be considered because of that.
Yeah, and you can see more of this with the early darkness. So you can like hear the squeak of a brake or a horn or something like that more often. Yeah.
Yeah, Nick sent me, there's a New York Times article that came out this week, talking about kind of when as pedestrian deaths are going up, when during the day, during the year, And it seems to be at dusk is the peak. And it moves based on sunset.
Not only is it at dusk, essentially all of our increase in pedestrian fatalities across the United States are at dusk. 3 and 4 are happening in that timeframe.
Yeah.
And so if you remove those, we trend with the rest of the world, or at least the rest of the first world countries that have similar traffic approaches to us. We're having a nationwide, I think last year was 7,200 deaths countrywide, and 3 and 4 of them are at dusk. And you can see when you graph those, and you can see the trend of the change in sunset with that. It's very fascinating.
I have a couple things. I mostly what I have to say is echoing what other people said, but I want to share. I do think, and this has been hinted at a couple times today, that making sure that any measures, that there's some kind of study about the neighboring, the impact to maybe the flow. If suddenly that street can't turn left there, or if something has changed, then what impact would it have nearby? So I think that should just be baked into the process. I also think that it needs to be captured, not just speed. And I do think perception matters, and I think experience matters. And that kind of gets back to the objectives. The safety is clearly an objective, and there's also, the city has objectives around protecting rural or neighborhood character, that sort of thing. And so I think that it seems like there should be, I don't know if it's an appeals process or something where, okay, well, we didn't meet the threshold on speed, but maybe volume, and especially if it's somehow volume related to the percentage of people that live on that street versus the volume of traffic, like some kind of metric that like some people that live in these small little streets that end up being cut through streets are having to take more than their share of, the traffic, whatever. So I think that there should be some, it sounds like we all agree there should be some other factors besides, but I just wanted to emphasize that even though I think that it'd be important to try to find some objective criteria to describe this perception. If people are feeling that way, and it may be a little bit of what you're saying, the road geometry, if there's no sidewalk, there could be, and yes, it's subjective, but traffic engineers and traffic designers are great at capturing things that seem subjective, but actually do maybe have some objective ways, objective descriptions that could be baked into policy, just to make sure we're capturing what it might be like to live on a street where suddenly there's a lot of trucks, rolling down your street, or just something that captures some of these experiences that maybe the perception, the speed isn't really turning out to be what they think it is, but there's something driving that perception, and trying to have a policy that attempts to capture what it is that's driving that perception. Because people aren't making this up. They got better things to do with their time than just complain about, traffic. So, I don't know, but anyway, I just think we need to dig into that a little bit and not just say, oh, it's subjective, we can't consider it. So, and I also really think that this is just like striking that fairness chord in me. I definitely was struck by the idea that there wasn't a 10, that the 85th percentile criteria wasn't met, but the city did the project anyway, and then someone else is told that they can't. So I'm not saying those were bad decisions. I'm saying that I think it needs to be described, it needs to be transparent when the city, a city-driven traffic calming measure, what their criteria is and why it might be different than a neighborhood-driven one. I'm not saying that they shouldn't exist, but I think we just need to be really proactive about the fairness question there and have a legitimate public purpose for why the city has a different standard. And if there isn't one, then maybe the city has to go through the same steps. But I think that really needs to be examined and included in the policy, or certainly in the plan. Or does anyone else have anything to add on this topic of what we want to throw in the hopper while they? Is Erica, your hand still up, or is it up again?
It's up again. I also wanted to, I know we had mentioned earlier at the meeting about like folks that send in emails. I just wanted to draw one that mentioned Vision Zero. And I'm also curious like how that plays in to like the design of our traffic calming policy. I don't know. It sounds like the plan is to look at, like things that work nationally, like tapping into like maybe more like regionalized plans and things. But I just wanted to make sure that that was at least like acknowledged and mentioned and called out specifically.
Yeah, I believe that email comment mentioned that we might have adopted it. I just want to clarify that it hasn't been adopted formally in Issaquah.
Hasn't actually led to any success, so, I mean, I'm certainly not in favor of adopting policies that have not demonstrated success. But
And that is something that, yeah.
there's a reduction, I'm all for.
And we can, yeah, well, yeah, and that's something that we can also look at is, what are the pieces of Vision Zero that work and don't maybe work and integrate that in as well. So, yeah, absolutely.
I think that's a good goal. I like the Vision Zero.
So I've talked to Thomas, the transportation planner, and at some point there will be a Vision Zero policy discussion, so stay tuned. I know he's got a big lift with the comp plan. I've told him my time frame because it affects grant competitions in 2026.
Oh.
So, or most likely will, so that's when, before then, I would be interested in having us look at Vision Zero. We have the mobility master plan says we will eventually get to a Vision Zero policy. So bottom line, Vision Zero is coming, so not part of this. Or the policy discussion is coming. I want to get ahead of the discussion.
All right, did you get what you were hoping for and then some?
Yeah, I think that I'll move on to this. I want to say thank you for this. I would say, I know we've talked about it in tab before, but I would call this an opening conversation, especially with this group. I really love these discussions. Traffic calming is one of the things that attracted me to planning in the first place. I got into it in grad school, so I'm really excited to bring it. Well, talk about it in Issaquah and see what we can develop. So, yeah, thank you again. And as it says, see you next year.
Isn't too far away.
Indeed. Well, that's a wrap on item 4. It sounds like we're on to reports. I see you have a work plan. Are we going to come talk about this again in January? Seems a little quick for that.
Yes.
Process you just slide you put up.
Slides.
Are we the third Wednesday or the fourth Wednesday? The fourth Wednesday.
Yeah, there we go. Can you repeat the question?
Oh, I was just surprised to see you think you'll be back in January to discuss this, but really it's your.
It's a good question.
Okay.
Yeah, and I've been thinking about it since I posted this, 3 days ago. I've been thinking about that as well. So this is a tentative schedule. We do have a TIP transportation improvement program conversation coming in February and March, I believe tentatively, or is that for sure?
It has to be. We have a
Okay, great.
deadline.
Okay, great. There's a deadline. We have to have it. So that is coming. I also want to mention that TAB is one of 4 boards that clerks have tapped to basically try to develop a year-long work plan. So I'll be touching base with you about that soon. So this is still our kind of TBD-ish work plan, but this is sort of what we have to look forward to. I think Thomas is coming back March or April as well, probably with some stuff as well. So That's work plan.
And give a staff report.
Yes. Do. So I have a couple of updates. The first one is Emily sent out an email, I think it was before the almost November meeting about ITS. So just to reiterate that, City Council approved the ITS plan on November 6th. They expressed gratitude to TAB and city staff. Nick will be leading plan implementation. Some council members, sorry, I don't know what that is. Yeah, the council is eager to basically enhance intercity mobility and support immediate upgrade projects outlined in 2023, 2024 budgets. And then the other staff report is from Dale Markey Crimp, who came and presented to us about ADA. This is the statement she sent me. Issaquah City Council adopted the 2024 to 2029 ADA transition plan on Monday, October 23rd. This plan provides self-evaluation of physical and program barriers to access and full participation for individuals protected by the ADA. The plan also outlines the city's planned approach to remove barriers and improve access to 4 key areas: public right-of-ways, city parks and trails, buildings and facilities, and programs and services. The city's approach to barrier removal prioritizes reported issues, barriers that are a part of the planned and funded capital projects, severity of barrier, and proximity to places of interest for individuals with disabilities. This is dense. Information about the self-evaluation and plan can be viewed at the city's website. An update on progress towards planned improvements will be provided to City Council annually starting the first quarter of 2025. Community members should continue to provide city with requests for barrier removal through ADA concerns category on CPFX. That's it for that.
I don't have a chair report, except I was just gonna mention something I said earlier, and that's just, I'll try to, figure out a way to develop a practice for what comments to make about email comments that we get leading up to it. It sounds like there's some latitude there. The attempt would be to capture and remind us all about things that people had to say, but also not risk misinterpreting what people had to say. And so we'll give that a little thought. And then I was gonna say, we normally have a youth report, and I'm not gonna ask you for a report, but I will invite you to think about what you might want to share that the tab might want to hear about anything relevant to people in transportation in the future. And I think that's all for reports. And do we have any other business?
I do not know.
Well, with that, I think that we could adjourn, but I just want to say thanks to everybody for all the work throughout the year, and look forward for a exciting and productive 2024. Yes.
All right.
Meeting is adjourned.